Chapter 1. The fighter with no hometh crowd roared Aiden Malik's name. If their voices could fill the emptiness inside him. The underground arena was thick with sweat, smoke, and the metallic scent of blood. Aiden barely heard the cheers as he pulled his gloves off with shaking hands. His ribs throbbed from the match he had just won. His knuckles were raw and torn. Victory felt like nothing more than another weight on his tired shoulders. He stepped out of the ring and into the cold night air behind the warehouse. The noise from the crowd faded into a distant rumble as he walked away. His breath left white clouds in the air, and his legs felt unsteady. He should have felt pride for surviving another fight. Instead he felt hollow, like the world had drained the last bit of strength from him. Aiden leaned against a brick wall and wiped the blood from his cheek with the back of his hand. The sting made him wince. He had spent years growing used to pain, but the loneliness that followed him everywhere still caught him by surprise. There was no one waiting for him, no voice calling his name with warmth, only the cold and the dark. A pair of soft footsteps approached. Aiden tensed automatically. The arena was no place for random strangers. When he looked up, he saw a girl standing hesitantly in front of him. Her hands clutched a tote bag full of sketchbooks and brushes. Her eyes were wide with concern rather than fear. The girl took a careful step closer. Her voice was gentle as she spoke. She asked if he was all right. Aiden blinked at her, unsure how to respond. He had fought grown men all night, yet the kindness in her voice unsettled him in a way he could not explain. She introduced herself as Liana Bennett. Her hair fell in soft waves around her face and paint stained her fingers. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small first aid kit. Aiden stared at it as if it were an object from another world. Liana told him she had been passing by and had seen him leave the arena. She had noticed the blood on his skin and could not walk away. Aiden wanted to tell her it was fine. He wanted to tell her that she did not need to bother with someone like him. But the words would not come. She stepped closer until she stood right in front of him. She asked if she could help him clean the cut on his brow. Her eyes held a sincerity he had not seen in years. Aiden felt something inside him soften, just slightly. He gave a small nod. Liana opened the kit and gently touched a cloth to his skin. Her hands were warm and steady. Aiden's pulse jumped for reasons that had nothing to do with pain. Her presence felt strangely calming. The world around him grew quiet, as if the night itself paused to watch this unexpected moment. Liana worked carefully, her brow furrowed as she focused on tending to him. Aiden watched her, trying to understand why a stranger would care this much. He felt a question forming inside his chest. He wondered when someone last looked at him with anything other than fear or fascination. When she finished, she gave him a small smile. She told him he looked like someone who carried too much alone. Aiden swallowed hard, unsure how she could see through him so easily. Before he could speak, Liana gently placed the cloth away and stepped back. She told him that, if he ever needed help again, he could find her at her art studio nearby. The words felt unreal to him. Someone had offered him a place to go. He almost did not know what to do with that. Liana gave him one last warm smile before turning to leave. Aiden watched her disappear down the street. The night felt different now, softer, warmer. For the first time in a long time, he felt something flicker inside him. It was faint, but comforting. Hope. And he had no idea that the girl with paint-stained hands had just stepped quietly into the darkest corners of his life. Chapter 2. Soft Hands. Gentle Liana pushed open the creaky door of her small apartment studio with her shoulder, while guiding Aiden inside. He hesitated on the threshold, as if unsure he belonged anywhere that looked warm or safe. The studio was filled with the scent of paint and lavender candles. Canvases leaned against the walls in uneven stacks. Soft golden light from a single lamp made the space feel calm and lived in. Aiden stood stiffly, almost awkwardly, his bruised hands hanging at his sides. He felt out of place among the colors that filled every corner. He was used to the grey world of concrete floors and cold fists. Liana's studio felt like another planet. Aiden's boots left small marks of dirt on her white rug, and he immediately apologized. Liana shook her head with a soft smile and told him it was all right. She guided him to sit on a wooden stool near her desk. Her movements were careful, as if she understood that he might bolt if she pushed her hard. Aiden lowered himself onto the stool with a sigh he did not mean to let slip. His ribs ached, his face throbbed, but the quiet in the room eased the tension gunning through his body. Liana set her tote bag down and opened a worn first aid kit. She pulled out fresh wipes and antiseptic. Her hands were steady and gentle. Aiden watched her silently, studying the way her fingers moved. He could see dried streaks of blue and ochre paint on her skin. She looked like someone who used her hands to create beauty rather than harm. She stepped closer and tilted his head slightly, so she could clean the dried blood near his eyebrow. Aiden had been hit countless times in countless fights, but the touch of her fingertips made his breath slow. He felt vulnerable under her care. It was a strange feeling, almost unfamiliar. Liana asked him if the pain was bad. He shrugged, saying he had felt worse. She gave him a look that was neither pity nor fear. It was concern, pure, honest. Aiden had no idea what to do with that dot. As she finished cleaning the wound, she noticed the way his shoulders remained tense. She told him he did not have to act strong here. The words made something inside him shift. He did not respond, but his hands relaxed slightly on his knees. Liana stepped away to wash her hands. When she turned back, she found Aiden quietly observing a canvas resting beside him. It showed a half-finished painting of a city street at night. Soft lights glowed from windows. Aiden studied it with a focus she had not expected. She told him it was part of her project for school. He nodded slowly and said it looked peaceful. She smiled at the unexpected gentleness in his voice. Aiden felt the room grow heavy with a strange comfort he had not felt in years. He glanced around again, taking in the colors that filled the small apartment. He could hear the faint hum of the city outside, muted by the thick walls. It felt safe here, too safe for someone like him. He started to say he should leave. Liana looked at him, her expression softening. She asked him to stay for a little while longer. She said she did not like the idea of him going back into the cold night covered in bruises. Her care felt like a warm hand around his heart. Aiden stayed. Liana sat across from him and quietly sketched in her notebook. She thought he was not paying attention, but Aiden noticed the way her eyes moved from him to the page. He wondered what she saw. He wondered what she drew dots as the minutes passed. He felt the heaviness in his chest loosen. For the first time in a long time, Aiden Malik did not feel alone. Dot and Liana, with her soft hands and gentle whirring, had no idea that she was slowly stitching together pieces of a heart that had been broken long before she ever touched it. Chapter 3. Color meets Chouse. Aiden returned to Liana's studio the next afternoon with the intention of thanking her and leaving quickly. He told himself it was only polite to repay kindness. He told himself he would stay for only a minute, but when he reached her building, he paused outside the entrance as if unsure he had the right to step into her world again. Inside, the studio was empty. A soft note taped to the door said she would be at the Community Arts Center for a workshop. Aiden stared at the note for a long moment before deciding to find her. He told himself he was only checking on her. In truth, he did not want the quiet comfort of the previous night to fade so soon. The Community Arts Center was lively and bright. Children ran through the halls with paint on their hands and laughter in their voices. Adults worked at long tables covered with drawings and clay figures. Aiden felt out of place the moment he stepped in. His bruised knuckles stood out in a room filled with soft colors and gentle noise. He spotted Liana at the front of a classroom, where she guided a group of students through a painting exercise. She wore a paint-splattered apron, and her hair was tied loosely behind her head. Her smile lit up the entire room. Aiden felt something strange and warm in his chest as he watched her. He took a step inside, hoping to slip quietly to a corner, but a young boy running with a cup of rinse water bumped into him. The water splashed onto Aiden's shirt and across the floor. Several heads turned. The noise in the room faltered. Aiden froze, feeling everyone's eyes on him. He apologized quickly, his voice low. The boy apologized too, looking scared. Aiden knelt down and told the child it was all right. The gentleness in his voice surprised everyone, including himself. Liana rushed over, concern flickering in her eyes. She asked if he was hurt. Aiden shook his head and told her he had come to thank her for last night. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, watching the tall, bruised man standing awkwardly among the paint jars and paper pallets. Liana guided him to the side of the room and handed him a clean cloth. She told him he could stay if he wanted. Her tone was quiet and hopeful. Aiden looked around the room again. The chaos of colors and movements made him feel unsteady, but the softness in her eyes steadied him. A child tugged at Liana's sleeve and pointed at Aiden. The boy asked if he was a fighter. Aiden hesitated, unsure what to say. Liana answered for him with a gentle smile. She said he was a friend who was learning about art. Aiden felt a warmth spread through him, the word friend. Liana handed him a clean sheet of paper and a brush. She encouraged him to try painting. Aiden stared at the brush as if it were something foreign. He dipped it in paint with an expression of deep concentration. His first stroke was uneven and messy. Liana laughed softly, not unkindly. Aiden felt his cheeks warm with embarrassment. She placed her hand over his to guide him. Her fingers rested lightly on his scarred knuckles. The touch sent a wave of warmth through him. The paint flowed smoother under her guidance. The room around them faded into a blur of color and quiet laughter. Aiden felt something loosen inside him. He had spent years throwing punches and guarding his heart. Now he stood in a bright room filled with the scent of paint and the sound of children's voices. He felt clumsy and uncertain, but he felt alive. When the workshop ended, Liana gathered her supplies, while Aiden stayed near the window. She walked over to him and thanked him for coming. Her smile was soft and full of genuine affection. Aiden felt words gather at the back of his throat. He wanted to tell her that her world felt like a breath of air after years of smoke and darkness. He simply told her that the day felt good. Liana looked at him for a long moment, as if she could see more than his bruises and scars. She told him he was welcome in her life whenever he wanted to be. The sincerity in her voice wrapped around him a warm blanket. Aiden stepped outside into the late afternoon light, feeling strangely lighter. Color and chaos had collided with his dark life, and for the first time in years, he wondered what it would be like to build something softer than fists and fear. And he realized he wanted to find out. Chapter 4. A heart and rapid Aiden knocked gently on Liana's studio door the next evening. He told himself he was only stopping by to return the cloth she had lent him. But the truth lingered quietly in his chest. He wanted to see her again. He wanted to feel that calm she brought into his chaotic world. Liana opened the door with a surprised but warm smile. Her studio was lit softly, the golden glow from her lamp making the room feel like a safe corner of the world. The air smelled faintly of vanilla and turpentine. Aiden stepped inside, feeling the familiar tug of nervousness mixed with comfort. She offered him a seat on the same wooden stool he had used before. Aiden sat, his hands resting on his knees. His bruises were a fading purple now, but the ache beneath them remained. Liana noticed the way he winced when he moved, and her expression softened. She asked if the fights were always that brutal. Aiden hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. He had spent years keeping his past locked behind thick walls. Speaking about it felt like stepping into a room full of broken glass. He told her that he had been fighting since he was young. He said barely more than that, but it was enough to open a small window into his life. Liana listened with quiet attention, her eyes steady on his face. She did not interrupt or press for more. Her patience felt like a gentle pull, rather than a force. She asked if fighting made him feel powerful. Aiden shook his head. He admitted that it sometimes felt like the only thing he knew how to do. His voice was low, almost uncertain, as if he feared saying the truth aloud. He told her that when he stepped into the ring, it felt like the world finally made sense. But when the match ended and the noise faded, the emptiness returned. Liana moved to the small table beside him and opened her sketchbook. She turned it around to show him a drawing she had been working on. It was a rough sketch of him sitting on the stool, his posture heavy and tired. She had captured the distant look in his eyes, a look he was not aware she had seen. Aiden stared at the drawing, his chest tightening. He asked her why she would draw someone like him. Liana told him she drew what moved her. She said that there was a story behind his eyes, a story that mattered. Aiden looked away, his jaw clenched with emotion he did not know how to name. No one had ever looked at him and seen anything beyond fists and scars. The idea that she saw him as something deeper made his heart feel unsteady. Liana reached out and touched his hand lightly. Her voice was soft when she told him that he did not always have to be strong. The gentle sincerity in her words shook something loose inside him. Aiden tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. Liana did not push him. She simply kept her hand on his for a moment, letting the quiet settle around them. Her touch felt like sunlight warming old wounds. Aiden finally found his voice. He told her about the house he grew up in. He told her that silence in that house meant danger. He spoke slowly, carefully, revealing only fragments of memories that still haunted him. He said he had learned to fight before he had learned to read. He said that fighting became the only way to feel in control. Liana listened with tears gathering slowly in her eyes. She squeezed his hand and whispered that no child should learn fear before hope. Her words wrapped around his heart and softened a corner he did not know how to protect. The room felt still as they sat there. The weight of his past hung between them, but it no longer felt like something he had to carry alone. Liana's presence turned the heaviness into something he could breathe through. She asked him, anyone ever made him feel safe? Aiden shook his head. Safety had always been a stranger to him. Until now. Until her. Liana leaned closer. She told him that he deserved gentleness. She told him that he deserved a life that did not hurt every time he tried to live it. The emotion in her voice made Aiden's chest ache, with a strange mixture of longing and fear. He met her gaze. The world felt quiet around them. He saw no pity in her eyes. Only warmth, only truth. In that moment, Aiden understood something simple but life-changing. He had stepped into her studio seeking comfort he would never admit he needed. And now he felt his guarded heart slowly beginning to open, just enough for light to touch the corners he had kept hidden for years. Liana Bennett was not just soft hands and gentle whirring. She was the first person who ever made Aiden feel seen. And that frightened him as much as it soothed him. But he did not pull away. Not anymore. Chapter 5. The world that hurts. Aiden arrived at the underground arena much earlier than usual. The concrete corridors felt colder that night. The flickering lights overhead cast uneven shadows that crawled across the walls. Every sound echoed, sharp and unsettling. Aiden moved through the familiar space with the heavy awareness that something was different, something had shifted. The ring did not feel like a place he simply fought in. It felt like a trap he was slowly sinking into. He wrapped his hands with practiced movements. His fingers moved through the routine automatically, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking of Liana's warm studio. He kept thinking of the way she listened to him without judgment. He kept thinking of her soft voice telling him he deserved gentleness. The contrast made the arena feel even darker. Before he could finish, a man stepped into the room. Marcus Hale, the infamous handler who controlled many of the fights in the underground network. He was tall and sharply dressed. Everything about him carried an air of authority that demanded obedience. Aiden had dealt with him before. Marcus had always been cold. Tonight there was something more dangerous in his eyes. Marcus greeted Aiden with a calm smile that did not reach his gaze. He said that the higher circles were impressed with Aiden's recent wins. He said that Aiden was becoming a name worth investing in. Aiden did not respond. Praise from Marcus was rarely sincere. It usually came with chains hidden beneath the words. Marcus stepped closer and placed a contract on the table beside Aiden. He said there was a championship event coming up, the kind that drew wealthy sponsors and high stakes. He said Aiden had been chosen for it. The way he said chosen felt more like a threat than an honor. Aiden told him he was not interested. The fights had become heavier on his spirit lately. Every bruise felt like a reminder of a life he no longer wanted. He thought of Liana's gentle touch. He thought of her smile. He wanted a future where his knuckles were not always coated with blood. Marcus's expression darkened. He reminded Aiden that the underground network did not allow easy exits. He said that fighters were assets. He said that assets who refused to cooperate became liabilities. The coldness in his voice made Aiden's stomach tighten. Aiden stood his ground. He said he was done. Marcus stared at him with an unreadable calm. Then he leaned in and whispered that people who mattered to fighters often became targets. Aiden froze. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. A chill ran down his spine. Marcus tapped the contract with 2 fingers and said he expected an answer soon. Then he walked away, leaving the echo of his footsteps hanging in the air like a warning. Aiden sat alone in the empty room. His hands trembled slightly. For the first time in years, fear did not come from the fight ahead. It came from the possibility of danger, touching someone he cared about. Someone gentle. Someone who had shown him kindness without asking for anything in return. He left the arena before the night's matches began. His mind raced as he walked through the dark streets. His thoughts were a tangled mess of anger and worrying. He wanted to protect Liana. He wanted to keep her far from the world that had shaped him into someone he no longer wanted to be. When he reached her studio, he hesitated before knocking. The warm light inside soothed him the moment she opened the door. She greeted him with a concerned expression. She said he looked pale. She asked if something had happened. Aiden tried to speak, but the words felt heavy. He did not want to scare her. He did not want to drag her into the shadows that clung to his life. But he could not lie. He told her that someone from the ring had threatened him. He did not mention the part about her. Not yet. He could not bear the thought of causing fear in her eyes. Liana stepped closer and placed her hands on his arms. Her touch steadied him. She told him that he did not have to go through this alone. Her voice carried a strength he had not expected. She looked at him if she believed he could rise above all the violence that had shaped him. Aiden felt a knot tighten in his chest. He realized that he was standing at the edge of a choice. Either he would succumb to the world that hurt him, or he would fight for a future he had never dared to imagine. Liana guided him inside and told him to breathe. She made him tea and sat beside him while he tried to gather his thoughts. Her presence made the fear in his heart less sharp dots as the night grew quiet. Aiden understood something painful but true. The moment he let Liana into his life, he had gained something precious, and now he had something to lose. His world was becoming dangerous in ways she could not yet see, and the fight ahead was no longer just about survival. It was about protecting the first flicker of happiness he had found in years. Chapter 6. The night the walls felt rain had already begun to fall by the time Adrian reached Riley's apartment. It came down in steady sheets that blurred the streetlights and soaked through his shirt, but he barely felt the cold. His mind was fixed on her, on the tremor he had heard in her voice when she answered his call earlier, on the silence that followed after she said she was fine even though he could tell she was anything but. Riley opened the door only a few moments after he knocked. She looked small in the oversized hoodie she had thrown on. Her hair pulled into a messy knot, her face pale. The faint redness around her eyes made his chest tighten. She stepped aside without a word, and he walked in carefully, as if afraid that one wrong move would cause her to break. The apartment was dim except for the small lamp by the sofa. Riley sank into it with a sigh as if the cushions were the only thing holding her together. Adrian sat across from her at first, giving her space, letting her breathe. She avoided his eyes for a long moment and twisted her fingers together in her lap in a way that made his heart ache. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. She told him about the nightmares she never mentioned. She told him how the fear from her past came back in waves even on days when life felt calm and safe. She told him how she hated feeling weak, and how the shame gnawed at her even though she knew logically she had survived something terrible and deserved gentleness, not guilt. Adrian listened. He did not interrupt. He did not rush her. He let each word fall into the quiet room and settle there without judgment. When her voice cracked, he leaned forward and reached out slowly enough for her to see him coming. His hand rested atop hers, and she did not pull away. She let her fingers curl around his, as if needing something solid to hold on to. She confessed then that she felt like she was losing control of her own mind. She told him she was scared of being a burden to him and to everyone around her. She stared at their joined hands, like she was waiting for him to let go. Adrian moved from his chair to sit beside her on the sofa. He turned to face her fully, and their knees brushed lightly. He spoke softly and told her that she was not a burden, and that she could never be one. He told her that strength did not mean pretending she was not hurting, and that he would rather she be honest and trembling than silent and suffering alone. His voice had a gravity to it that she felt in her bones. Riley swallowed hard and finally met his eyes. The connection held for a long moment that seemed to quiet the storm outside. Then her breath hitched and the tears she had been holding back finally fell. Adrian drew her into his arms without hesitation, and she collapsed against his chest with a soft broken sound that made him hold her even tighter. She clung to him as if letting go would make the world fall apart. He pressed a gentle kiss to her hair. He whispered that she was safe, and that he was not going anywhere. Her fingers fisted in his shirt and her tears soaked through the fabric near his heart. When the storm inside her finally softened, she stayed with her cheek, resting against him while she breathed slowly, as if finding her rhythm again. She told him quietly that she did not want to face this alone anymore. Adrian cupped her face and brushed away the last of her tears with tender fingertips. He told her that she never had to face anything alone again, and that he would stand by her, no matter how dark the memories became. Riley leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his. There was no need for words. The warmth of that closeness said everything, and in that moment the walls she had built for years began to crumble in a way that felt frightening and healing all at once. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, Adrian held her as if she were something precious, and for the first time in a long time, Riley let herself believe she was. Chapter 7. The fight he cannot avoid. The morning was grey and heavy when Aiden woke. His muscles ached from yesterday's training, but it was not the soreness that made his chest tighten. It was the weight of the choice he had tried so hard to avoid. He thought of Liana sleeping peacefully in her studio. She had no idea the danger she would be simply by being near him. Aiden walked through the quiet streets toward the gym. The city was dim under the overcast sky. Each step felt heavier than the last. He had spent years avoiding fights he did not want, but now one had found him inescapably. It was not just his own skin at risk, it was hers. The thought made his fists clench. Before he even touched the door, Marcus Hale was already waiting when Aiden arrived. His smile was calm, but it carried the sharp edge of warning. He said the championship match would happen sooner than expected. He reminded Aiden that the people who had influence in the underground network did not tolerate refusal, especially from someone of his skill. He added, almost casually, that those closest to Aiden were at risk if he chose to defy them. Aiden stared at the contract on the table. He knew what it meant. Agreeing would drag him back into violence he no longer wanted. Refusing would place Liana in the crosshairs. The weight of responsibility pressed down so heavily that it was almost impossible to breathe. He had trained 4 fights, survived punches, broken bones, and blood, but he had never trained for this. The night before, he had tried to explain some of the danger to Liana. He had left out details, hoping to shield her. But now he realized it was impossible. Marcus had made his choice for him. Aiden had to step into that ring if he wanted her to be safe. The realization made a bitter taste fill his mouth. Aiden left the gym and walked to Liana's studio. The air was damp from recent rain, and the streets smelled faintly of wet asphalt and smoke. His mind was racing, but he focused on the small light glowing from her window. It was a beacon he had never realized he needed. When he entered the studio, Liana looked up with a smile. Her eyes were soft, but there was curiosity there, a quiet question she did not ask aloud. He tried to speak, but the words faltered. He told her that he needed to leave for a while. He said it carefully, masking the fear in his chest with calmness he did not feel. Liana frowned and asked why. Aiden hesitated, struggling with how much to reveal. He wanted to protect her by keeping the details vague, but he knew she deserved the truth. He told her that the fight he had been avoiding had become unavoidable, that he had to step into the ring, but it was not just about him anymore. He could not risk her safety. Liana's hands found his. Her fingers curled around his with quiet insistence. She looked at him and said that she was not afraid. She said she trusted him to come back. Her courage was like fire in his chest. Aiden wanted to tell her not to be brave. He wanted to shield her from this world entirely. But her eyes held him in place, steady and unwavering. He kissed her hand briefly and whispered that he would fight with everything he had, that he would survive this, no matter the cost. Liana nodded and pressed her forehead to his, offering strength he had not realized he needed. For a moment, the chaos of his life fell away, leaving only the two of them and the fragile bond they had built. When he left, the city seemed colder, darker, and heavier than ever. Every step toward the arena was a reminder that the world he had tried to escape had caught up with him. Every step was for Liana. Every punch, every bruise, every moment in that ring would be fought with her in his heart. He entered the arena, and the crowd's roar hit him with the force of a storm. But inside, he was calm. He had to be. He had no choice. The fight ahead was no longer about survival alone. It was about protecting the one person who had made him believe life could be softer. It was about winning a chance to hold on to something worth living for. And as he stood in the center of the ring, with the bright lights casting long shadows around him, Aiden Malik understood that some fights could not be avoided, no matter how much he wished they could. The only thing he could do was fight with everything he had. Chapter 8. Colors of Khrushchev. Morning sun streamed through Liana's studio window, painting the room with soft gold light. She sat at her work table, her hands covered in streaks of paint, but her mind was elsewhere. She had not heard from Aiden since he left for the championship match preparations, unwearing twisted in her chest like a coil of rope. She knew he was strong. She knew he was careful, but strength could only protect so much in a world filled with violence. She picked up her brush and tried to focus on the canvas before her, but every stroke felt forced. The colors blended into each other without meaning. She set the brush down and stepped back. Her eyes fell on the small stool where he had sat weeks ago, where he had allowed her to see the weight of his past. She thought of the bruised knuckles, the quiet pauses, the tension in his shoulders, and her chest ached. The doorbell rang. Liana froze. A small part of her feared it was someone from the underground network. Another part hoped it was him, walking through the door with that tired, intense look he always carried after training. She opened the door to find him standing there, his hair damp from the rain, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion, but alive. He stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. He did not speak at first. He let the silence settle between them like a fragile bridge. Liana studied him carefully. She saw the bruises forming on his arms, the tightness in his jaw, and the way his eyes shifted with quiet tension. She knew that something had tested him more than usual. She had a sense of what he had sacrificed to come back to her. Aiden finally spoke, his voice low and almost uncertain. He told her about the threats, about the pressure, and about the fight he could not avoid. He admitted that he had been trying to protect her by keeping her in the dark, but he could no longer carry the burden alone. His words trembled slightly, as if saying them aloud made the weight heavier. Liana stepped forward. She reached out and took his hands in hers, feeling the roughness of his knuckles softened by sweat and small cuts. Her eyes locked on his, unwavering. She told him that she refused to be pushed aside, that she would not hide while he carried the burden of the world alone. Her voice was steady, clear, and filled with conviction. She said he deserved love, courage, and a life free from fear. Aiden looked down at their intertwined hands, his chest tightening. He had spent years believing that strength meant carrying the world by himself, that love meant vulnerability was weakness. But her words were a lifeline. Her courage was contagious, and he realized that she was not afraid of his scars, his anger, or the dangers surrounding him. She accepted all of him, and that acceptance felt like a shield against the dark She moved to the canvas and gestured for him to sit. She wanted to show him something she had been working on in secret. As he lowered himself onto the stool, he saw the painting. It was a portrait of him, not as a fighter, not as a man marked by pain, but as the person she saw behind the scars. The eyes were the same as his own, but softened with a quiet depth, a hint of hope he had not allowed himself to see before. Aiden reached out, almost instinctively, to touch the painting. His fingers lingered over the strokes, feeling her presence in every mark of color. His chest ached with emotion. No one had ever seen him this way, and the realization made him tremble slightly. Liana watched him quietly, letting him absorb the truth without interruption. Finally, Aiden looked at her. His voice was hoarse and low. He whispered that he had never imagined someone could see him like that, all the broken and bruised parts, and still choose to stay. Liana smiled softly and said that she had always believed he was more than the fights, more than the bruises, more than the fear. She told him she would stand by him, no matter how hard the world tried to tear him away. Aiden's hands tightened around hers. He felt a surge of gratitude, love, and determination all at once. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that he could fight not just with his fists, but with his heart, that he could survive the world without losing himself to it. In that quiet studio filled with sunlight and paint, Aiden Malik realized that courage came in many forms. Sometimes it was facing an opponent in the ring. Sometimes it was standing vulnerable before someone who believed in you. And sometimes it was allowing yourself to be loved when you had spent your life believing love was dangerous. He leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers. Liana rested her hands over his. They stayed like that, silent and steady, drawing strength from each other. In that moment, he knew that no matter the fight ahead, he would not face it alone. And she knew she would follow him through any storm, because some bonds were stronger than fear, pain, and even the darkest parts of the world. Chapter 9. Bruised but unbroken. The arena lights burned bright against the darkened space, and the roar of the crowd hit Aiden a physical force. Every shout, every cheer, every echoing footstep reminded him of the life he had been trying to leave behind. But now, as he stood in the center of the ring, it was different. He was not fighting just for survival. He was fighting for Liana. He was fighting for the possibility of a life beyond pain. His fists ached, his ribs throbbed, and every muscle in his body screamed with exhaustion from weeks of preparation. The bruises on his arms and face had deepened, the purple and yellow mottled across his skin in the silent testament to his struggle. And yet, he felt more alive than he had in years. Every strike, every dodge, every movement was driven by something far stronger than the need to win. It was love, it was hope, and it was the promise of her gentle hands waiting for him on the other side. The opponent across from him was ruthless, a skilled fighter who showed no hesitation, no mercy. The bell rang, and the fight began. Each punch thrown, each block parried, sent shockwaves through Aiden's body. Pain flared through his muscles and bones, but he focused on the rhythm of the fight, on the beats between the strikes, on the knowledge that Liana believed in him. Memories of her soft studio flooded his mind. He remembered the way she had held his hands, the way she had painted him not as a fighter, but as a man worthy of gentleness. He remembered her words about courage and love. Those memories became shields around his heart, pushing back the fear, the doubt, the adrenaline-fueled chaos that threatened to overwhelm him. The opponent landed a heavy blow to Aiden's side, and he stumbled backward. Pain shot through him, stealing his breath, but he remembered her voice telling him he deserved a life free from fear. He straightened, tightened his stance, and threw a precise, calculated punch that caught his opponent off guard. The crowd roared, but Aiden heard only the echo of Liana's encouragement in his mind. Round after round, the fight pushed him to the edge of endurance. His knuckles were torn and bleeding, sweat and blood mixed across his face, and his vision blurred at the corners. Yet he refused to yield. Every jab, every hook, every movement was fueled by the thought of the life he wanted to build. A life where Bruised Knuckles could trade places with soft kisses and quiet mornings with Liana in the final round. Both fighters were exhausted, breathing heavily, bodies slick with effort and blood. Aiden saw the moment to strike, and he took it. His opponent faltered under the weight of his determination. Aiden's final punch was clean, precise, and powerful. The bell rang, signaling the end of the match. The arena erupted into chaos, but Aiden barely heard it. He had won, not just a fight, but the chance to protect everything that mattered to him. Leaning against the ropes, his body trembling from exertion, Aiden closed his eyes and imagined Liana waiting for him. He had survived the ring, survived the threats, survived the world that tried to claim him. And now, he was coming back to her. When he finally left the arena, the night air was cool and refreshing against his battered body. He walked quickly toward her studio, feeling the tension in his muscles slowly release. Each step brought him closer to the warmth he had fought for. He knew the road had been brutal, but every bruise, every scar, every strike had led him to this moment. As he reached her door, he paused, taking a deep breath. He opened it to find Liana standing there, worrying etched across her face. Her eyes lit up when she saw him, and she rushed into his arms without a word. He held her tightly, feeling the soft press of her body against his. Tears threatened to fall from both of them as they clung together, a quiet refuge in a world that had been cruel. For the first time in years, Aiden Malik allowed himself to rest. The bruises on his body were proof of the fight he had endured, but the softness in Liana's embrace reminded him of what he had survived for. He had fought through pain, through fear, through a world that demanded he be unbreakable. And now he understood that being unbroken did not mean standing alone. It meant letting someone stand with you. And in Liana's arms, he finally felt unbroken. Chapter 10. Soft kisses and quiet healing. Morning sunlight spilled gently across Liana's studio, falling on canvases still wet with paint and brushes resting in jars. Aiden sat on the edge of the worn sofa, his hands lightly bandaged, but his spirit lighter than it had been in years. The bruises on his body were fading, but the weight of fear and violence that had once defined his life was finally lifting. He could feel it in the quiet rhythm of the room, in the soft laughter of Liana as she moved about, tidying her art supplies. Liana turned to him with a bright smile. She wore a paint-stained apron and had streaks of color in her hair from yesterday's work. Her eyes met his and held a warmth that made the last months of struggle feel like a distant shadow. She walked over and set a fresh cup of tea on the small table beside him. Her fingers brushed his hand as she did, and he felt a spark of contentment he had long thought impossible. They talked quietly, sharing thoughts about the day, the studio, and the small plans they could finally make without fear. Liana laughed softly when Aiden tried to describe his awkward attempt at cooking breakfast. The sound was like sunlight breaking through clouds, and he realized that her joy had become a part of him he could not imagine losing. He wanted to protect it, to nurture it, and to build a life around it. Aiden reached for her hand and held it gently. He told her he never imagined that life could feel this calm, this safe, this full. Liana pressed her other hand over his and whispered that he deserved every bit of happiness he felt. She leaned in slowly and kissed him softly, the touch light and tender. The warmth of that kiss carried years of pain away and replaced it with trust, hope, and love. Aiden felt his lips curve into a smile, one that was unguarded and real. The rest of the morning passed in quiet comfort. Liana painted, while Aiden watched her, his eyes tracing her movements with fascination. She occasionally glanced at him, sharing small smiles that spoke of affection without words. For the first time, he did not feel the need to hide any part of himself. The bruised knuckles and the scars were part of his story, but they did not define him here. She saw the man he had become and accepted him wholly. Later, they moved to the small balcony of the studio. Sunlight warmed their faces, and the city hummed gently below. Aiden wrapped an arm around Liana's shoulders, while she leaned into him, resting her head against his chest. The moment was quiet, but full, a peaceful counterpoint to the chaos they had survived. Every heartbeat was a promise, every breath a reminder that love could heal even the hardest hearts. Aiden thought of all the fights he had endured, the nights of pain, the fear that had once consumed him. All of it had led him here, to this small studio filled with color, warmth, and the soft presence of someone who truly understood him. He realized that life could be fought for in many ways. Sometimes it was through physical strength, sometimes it was through courage, and sometimes it was simply through the act of opening one's heart and letting someone in. He kissed Liana again, this time longer and slower, tasting the softness he had once thought unattainable. She smiled against him, her fingers tracing the lines of his scars with gentle curiosity. He laughed quietly, a sound that had been absent for far too long. The studio seemed to glow around them, as if celebrating their small, hard-won victory. In that quiet space, surrounded by unfinished paintings and the faint smell of paint and tea, Aiden learned to trade bruised knuckles for soft kisses, and Liana learned that even the toughest hearts, hardened by life's battles, could be healed with love, patience, and courage. The world outside still carried shadows, but inside that studio, their hearts were unburdened. They had survived, they had fought, and they had chosen each other. And in the warmth of that choice, they discovered a life worth living together. Soft kisses lingered, quiet healing began, and for the first time, Aiden Malik knew that he was home.